What's up, guys, and welcome to BitCast episode 111 for the week of January 15th, 2023. I'm your host, Jake Martin, and on the show this week, we have Landry Smith.
Hey there.
And Ryan Darling.
Hey, what's going on?
All the way from Atlanta.
That's right, baby. Coming in from the A.
From the A, is that what they actually say?
Yeah, that's hot Atlanta. I'm coming in from Little John's territory. Yeah.
Oh, God.
I don't know. I can't do a hype call yet. I'm going to figure it out. Coming all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah. We got Usher and Little John. And
wait, isn't Usher's also like, he's to Chattanooga, isn't he?
Well, me and Usher now have that in common.
Yeah.
You can claim Atlanta,
I
but
can
you're
claim
from
Atlanta,
Chattanooga.
I'm from Chattanooga.
Whichever one
Okay.
feels right in the moment.
Yeah.
You basically only claim Chattanooga if you're pandering to a Chattanooga audience.
That's right.
It's very, very niche.
So what's up? I'm from Chattanooga. If I don't know if all BitBloggers fans, I hope BitBloggers has fans all across the world,
All across the globe that are familiar with Chattanooga, a really prominent, popular city in Tennessee. Yeah. But yeah, so it's kind of fun. I was thinking of the last time you guys are both in the podcast together, and it was talking about part 2. Last of Us Part 2. And so I guess that is a little bit of a hint as to what we're talking about today. So for y'all tuning in, we are going to be obviously talking about the first episode of The Last of Us, the HBO TV series that just premiered this past weekend. And then, of course, what we've been playing. So pretty excited about this conversation. I know, Landry, you said you hadn't talked to anybody yet. So this is going to be a fun dive into conversation. And Ryan, have you done any expositional conversation with people, any sort of dialogue?
Honestly, it's been kind of one of the cool things about this show is it's getting pretty popular already after just one episode. I ran into people talking about it at a bar I was at last night, and I just jumped in the conversation with the bartender, and I was like, hey, I played the game. I watched the show. I was like, I have some ideas and thoughts. So yeah, it's been really cool. But other than that, I haven't really had a chance to talk to anybody. I was kind of waiting on talking to you guys.
Sweet. Yeah, same here. I've had a few people I've talked to just briefly about it, but yeah, nothing in depth yet. So excited to have this conversation today. But before we do that, I do want to have a little bit of housekeeping here for you guys. If you are fans of the show, be sure to write into us with topic suggestions, leave us reviews on any of your preferred podcast platforms. That goes a long way. And we always just love hearing from you guys. So please be sure to do those two things. And then I do want to do this segment, even though we're talking about a TV show. It's one of my favorite segments on the show. Landry, I gotta know, what are you playing?
I'm glad you asked, Jake. I have been playing Tunic, which I know. I heard you talking to the Nintendo Watcher guy saying that you've been playing that, and I've probably put about maybe 3 or 4 hours into it, and I love it, man. That game you hit the nail on the head last time we talked to each other. You said that was a Landry-ass game, and it really is, man. It is 100% a Landry-ass game. Just the concept of it just being like a Zelda-like top-down, but having its own vibe of like being really combat focused, and just the idea of picking up the kind of manual as you go, which kind of cues you into where you're going to go next and gives you hints into even like button presses you didn't know you had that have been there the whole time. Some really cool stuff that they keep hidden from you. So
what's the one that you learn? It's like it's a combo, or like if you like push X and forward or something like that, you'll do like a rolling stab or something.
That's the one I was like kind of came onto a little late in the game. I was like, oh cool, I didn't realize there was any kind of like combo attack in any way. So yeah, it's really fun. I like it a lot.
The way it just like unveils stuff to you, is really impressive. What you were saying, sorry.
It is a little cryptic. In some parts, I've gotten a little hung up, but I just like being in that world. It's fun.
Now, Ryan, are you familiar with Tunic at all? Do you know what that game?
I just Googled it while you brought it up to see what it is, and I've seen photos of it, but it looks right up my alley. This seems like a lot of fun. Are you playing it on Switch, Landry? What are you playing it on?
It is on Switch, and I've heard the Switch port's really good. I'm playing it on PS5 though.
Nice. Yeah, I might pick it up on Switch.
I honestly wish I had gotten the Switch version now that I have it on PS5. I mean, the performance is flawless, but I've heard like maybe the frame rate drops a little bit on Switch. That wouldn't bother me at all in this game though, and I just rather would have it portably.
Yeah.
That portable benefit, man, you still can't beat it.
Agreed.
That's where the Steam Deck comes in, I guess. If you want to shell out $500 or whatever it costs.
Nah, it's probably not ever going to be a thing that I do.
Well, Ryan, how about you, man? What's going on in your end of the world in the A-Town?
Well, I just got a job as a chess coach for elementary school kids.
That is incredible.
So since I've moved, I killed my interview, and I actually had to play my boss in chess in my job interview, which was really interesting because there was no way I was going to beat him anyway. But I was like, if I beat you, do I get your job? Is that how this works?
Or am I fired?
Yeah. I was like, I don't know. Do I do well? So I just tried not to make an ass out of myself. So I've been just brushing up on the game, just reading books, and just playing a little bit online, but mostly against computers, and then just getting into puzzle solving on chess. And then my girlfriend's currently going through Stardew, so
nice.
And so we do couch go up with it, so I'll just pop in and go fishing for a little while. And then I got NBA 2K Playgrounds, which is the closest thing to NBA Jam there is now, and that's a fun little pick me up. But I love story-based games, and I just haven't sat down. I just haven't really had the time to sit down with something good. So Tunic sounds right up my alley. And then on my radar right now is It Takes Two, which just came out on Switch. I really want to play that.
It Takes Two is great. I played that with Liz, and man, what a game. She doesn't even play video games as I think you guys know, but she really enjoyed that one. And it's like an actual video game. There's some pretty gnarly platforming segments and stuff. And, she just enjoyed it enough to power through. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, It Takes Two is great. I played through that with Eric actually, and we had a blast. We did that actually online. So he was just playing on his PS5. I was playing on mine, and they give you a free code. So yeah, that's the nice thing about It Takes Two. You can give the digital code to somebody else, and you can play online. For free.
Oh, that's cool.
That's awesome.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, pretty sick. Yeah, they did us right. Waypoint or who is it Waypoint or who makes that game?
I can't
Way
remember.
Forward, Waypoint. It's something like that. But yeah, Joseph Fares. That's his studio. So
yeah, I should remember him from the Game Awards. His drunken rants and
he's a staple now.
He's a pretty funny guy. Yeah,
he's a staple of the Game Awards now. Yeah. Well, that's great, man. Hopefully your chess game improves. You should just watch some Magnus Carlsen videos or something like that, and you're
get a butt plug. Yeah, get a butt plug put in that vibrates to tell me what to do in my job interview. I could use that in general in my life, just something that tells me what to do or how to improve. Just I did the wrong thing.
Just get a little earpiece. Someone just in your ear just telling you no.
What are you playing, Jake?
I am trying to finish up God of War Ragnarok right now.
Ooh, man.
Have either of y'all played and or beaten that?
I'm far into it. I can't remember exactly how many hours, but I've been chipping away at that for I called it my game of the year last year, I think on this pod. So
yeah. So I'm I don't know, I'm probably a little over halfway through now. I just got the third weapon that you get, and so that's where I am. I don't want to spoil much else more than that, Landry, if you haven't gotten there yet. But
I probably haven't gotten there yet. But so far it's just incredible storytelling in a video game, and really enjoy it. The only thing that these games and Last of Us Part 2, God of War 4, whatever the 2018 version was, they all kind of have the same thing in common to me, and that's just they're just a little too long. But as far as AAA storytelling in video games, there's just nothing better than what Sony's doing right now.
Yeah.
Before I moved, I 100%ed Ghost of Tsushima. I platinumed the game, and
that's awesome.
I mean, I loved the story in that game, and I sunk a lot of time into that game. I really loved that, and that's a Sony exclusive, and I mean, they really are just crushing it as far as story-based games go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they definitely they have carved out their space in the gaming world.
That's their thing. Yeah. But I do think like you were saying, Landry, the length kind of wears on you a little bit. So like I knew where the story was going, and then it's kind of slowed down, and then now I'm on like a different story arc, and I'm like, oh, I'm back in. Like I'm back into this, where I'm going with this now. So excited to finish that up. I feel like I'm close enough to where I can finally like power through. I'm not discouraged anymore by not knowing how much time I have left. So I think I'm getting there.
And to be clear, I haven't like fallen off of it in any way. I'm just, since school started, it's like one of those games that I want to sink like maybe 2 hours of playtime in at a time, and I just have not had that space in my life. It
needs that almost
in 2 or 3 weeks. So I do feel bad I haven't gotten into it in a little while, but maybe that day will come for me in the future.
It will. One of these weekends, early morning, that's usually when my time is. So
yeah,
we'll make it happen. All right. Well, that was a great segment. Great games all around. And now I think it's time we jump into the old topic of the show. So The Last of Us TV show, what are they calling this? They just calling this The Last of Us HBO TV series. I don't know what they have like on the internet for the distinction there. I think they have HBO with parentheses around it. I've seen. But
I think pretty soon, like, and if you say The Last of Us, like 90% of everyone is just going to think you're talking about the TV show.
Exactly. Yeah. It's kind of so you reminded me of this, Ryan, when you're talking about your story in the bar. People were talking about it, like, oh, I played the game. It's kind of like, is this the first instance where it's almost the equivalent of like, oh, I read the book, mm-hmm. for the movies, where it's like, oh, I played the game. Like I know the original source material, and I can confirm or deny if I think the original is better. Because I mean,
I kind of feel like that.
I don't know if there's been as much of a 1-to-1 adaptation of a game to a TV series or film as The Last of Us. Like we had the Assassin's Creed movie that I don't really think pulled from like directly from any of those games. It was just kind of like the same idea. I don't know. Uncharted is also its own story, really, it seems. So
which I had a lot of fun with Uncharted personally.
Yeah, it was a good
different
action
note, but
yeah, it was a good little action movie. No real complaints there. Not the most deep, but hey.
Oh yeah, it was. But by no means was it like a great film. But I just had fun with it. I thought it was like a very, fine experience at the theater. Good time, and
good time.
I wanted to see it. Did they ever shoot a tank off of a train at a helicopter? Did that happen in the movie?
There's something like that. I mean, there
are some callbacks to the,
because that is like the coolest thing I've ever done in any video game ever.
Yeah,
that the train level in Uncharted 2 is unbelievable.
For the sequel of Uncharted.
Okay, because that sequence is fantastic. One of the best moments in video game history. That shit's wild.
I would have to agree.
Well, hey, maybe you'll have to watch the movie to find out, Ryan.
I need to. I really need to.
But, we're talking about Naughty Dog that made Uncharted, and they also made The Last of Us. So let's talk about it. So it came out this past Sunday. And the first question I have for you guys actually came from Cassie Jones, a friend of the show. I was like, what questions do you think we should ask in this podcast? And this was one of her suggestions. So she said, what expectations did you have going into this, and how are they met or not met? And so I'll start off to kind of give like a loose run of my experience. I feel like I had high expectations going into this because I was on the internet and I had just been seeing everything, people talking about how good it was. Because I think critics already were able to see every single episode of the show. And so everyone was just praising it already. And I was like, oh man, people are loving this. And my only skepticism was, how sometimes like early reviews come out before like the general critics all get it. And you're like, is this a real depiction of like audience review, like critic reviews? Or is this just like a few critics that have like given it this like really, really good score? Because like Rotten Tomatoes was sitting at like 90 something for a day or so, and then I think it's still up there in the 90s. But I had high expectations, and I would say they were absolutely met. Landry, how about you?
Yeah, I would say that my expectations were really high for this one. And honestly, like, I feel like I almost had a lot in like a stake in this claim in some way. Cause like I've told so many people in my life that, hey, this is an incredible story. And not just like, this is not like a normal zombie story. Like there's like a lot of emotional weight to this. And this is a story about characters and love and vengeance and fatherhood, just got some really, yeah, absolutely, and redemption, and like it just got a lot of like wonderful themes, and I think it's definitely meeting those expectations so far in the first episode, but really exceeding the expectations. I think as a piece of like just TV, it was fantastic and really did a lot of really excellent things. I can't wait to dive into what it did so well. And I feel like it hit all the notes so far of that first opening segment of the game. So
Ryan?
Landry, I'm right there with you where I felt like I had a lot invested because I've told so many people about the game. It kind of reminds me of, do you guys remember the opening of The Princess Bride? When the grandpa is he's like, you brought a book. That's how I felt about the game being like, they're like, you got all that from a video game. And you're like, yeah, I got all of this stories about love and about parenthood and about vengeance and about, just loss, like a story about tremendous loss, all from a game, that's like how I felt about the show. So I came in just like being like, please just don't ruin the one thing I love most in this world. And they did a great job. They really did a terrific job. And I'm really excited to experience, I don't know what I was expecting, but since the game is in first person, taking you out of a first person world and making it more, in the realm of just opening up the perspectives a lot, I had to adjust how I view the story, if that makes any sense. So I've watched it 2 or 3 times now. And now that I'm kind of used to taking in the story from this angle, I love it. But it took a little while to kind of just adjust me from not being like the camera not being directly behind Pedro Pascal all the time.
You're not controlling the action.
Yeah, you're not controlling any of it. But I really, really expected great things, and they kept wowing me. It was really nice.
Nice. Yeah, so I guess kind of talking about that, next you mentioned Pedro Pascal. So like character updates and changes from the game, there's a lot in here that already is different from the first opening, hours of the game. But Landry, like anything stand out to you as like exciting changes or, just things that you like that they did in the show?
As far as characters go?
Characters or just like general changes you've noticed with like the way they're handling certain story arcs.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's a thing in video games called ludonarrative dissonance, and it's this idea of the difference between the narrative, like what the video game's trying to tell you in the narrative, and then what's going on in the video game. And in The Last of Us and games like Uncharted, you have this story of these characters you're trying to get attached to, and they have all these kind of anti-hero qualities, but they have real heroic qualities as well. Like Joel is a very protective person, but he's also kind of destructive in a lot of ways in his life as well. But at the same time, every great thing he does, like in the narrative of the story, we go out and then you go on a killing spree, and like one level you'll kill like 20 people. And so and even in the opening segments of the game, not with Sarah, but with, a little later on, you're killing like a couple of like gangsters, but it's just like so brutal and heartless. And you're like, wow, this guy is a savage killer. That's the way you feel in the video game kind of. And in the The TV show, they don't have to do that because they're not building levels out for you, right? So
right.
You're just seeing what's in the narrative. So you're allowed to get attached to these characters in a little bit of a different way. And I think what's really going to work for the show is that even right off the bat, Joel is a much more protective, like in his nature, he's a much more protective character. He's obviously protective of Sarah, but then he seems very protective of Tess as well. And we even see some scenes of him in that first episode of being protective of Ellie as well. So we're able to get attached to him as a protector. And he still has his darkness. It's very easy to see, but we're not like him not killing 15 people in the opening scene gives you allows you to attach to him much better, especially in like a TV scenario. And I think if you played video games for any amount of time, there is that academic term, ludonarrative dissonance. It's where the player separates that kind of from the narrative. It's almost natural to, right? And just not having to do that if you're like trying to analyze the story and the themes of the story, which I've been trying to do for years, it's really easy. It's much easier to do.
Yeah, in a game, it's so much easier because you're just so used to it. Like it's this subconscious thing. You're just like, okay, yeah, cutscene, here it comes, and then here comes the bad guys. I'm just gonna go kill 30 dudes that are trying to ambush me, and then I'm gonna keep the story going. You know, like those two things are almost entirely separate. Like the amount of bloodshed that happens in this game and part 2 is just, I would say, pretty astronomical. So yeah. That is a really great point. I love that analysis. That's really interesting. Yeah, there's just so much more opportunity to let the story just do its thing. Just be the story that it always has been. So that's great. Ryan?
I think on Landry's point, some of that violence, though, that Joel does have, we only got to really see at the very end of the episode, where there was one thing I wish they would have put into the episode, which was when Joel finally gets to confront Robert. Joel like breaks his arm, like Tess breaks his leg, and then Joel like holds him down, and then they're not getting that information from him. And then Joel breaks his arm, and I don't know if we're doing spoilers for later.
That's fine.
But Joel does end up, hurting people to get information out of them. And that is something that I don't think we've seen him do yet. Like we're kind of viewing Joel as like, we feel so bad for him. He lost his daughter, blah, blah, blah. But one thing they're not really setting up in the 2023 version of Joel quite yet is just kind of him being kind of a piece of shit, because he's not a good person. Like, and there's a million reasons why, but at the end of the day, he's a violent person, and they didn't really show us much of that until the very end of it. So that was a change I am getting used to.
But dude, when you get that violent side of him, though, it comes out, and I feel like there was at least one mention in the dialogue of like the years before of like some of the bad stuff they had done or gotten into. And what's great about the game is, none of that's really mentioned up front in the game. It's all subtext. And I'm interested to see I feel like the TV show in the future will probably explore that a little more. And I guess we'll talk more about that when like how I think they'll approach part 2. But
yeah,
I also think maybe because I know the story very, very well, and I hope everybody who's listening to this knows the story, because I think after all is said, after you play the game, you have a different perspective on who Joel is. Like you love him no matter what, but like after you're done with it, you go back and play the game, you have a different understanding of like who he actually is as a person. And I love that character. And I mean, I understand exactly why he does what he does, but it is a really interesting thing to see. I'm wondering if people watching the show are just kind of seeing him as like a hero who's just had bad things happen to him, where I think in the actual story, he's more a little bit less heroic than all that.
Well, it's interesting because this game has always been interesting in that you get to see the traumatic experience that forms the rest of Joel's life. And the fact that that's a launching point that he has when he's like 35 is unique, I think. But, you get to see that traumatic moment in his life that launches him into that kind of like immediately, and it's not, I feel like if his daughter had died in a terrible way and he was in the real world, things would be different. But the fact that he's pushed into a, post-apocalyptic, like survivalist world, his selfish survival instincts kick in, and he's living his life for one rule and one rule only, and that's for him to survive. Right? Well, ultimately, that's his goal.
Yeah, and they do a good job, I think, in the show of hinting at that a little bit.
Yes.
With like Tess being like, Robert's so scared of you, like he's terrified of you.
That's
because they already know they know Joel's like character already, and then you kind of see that, and this is from the game as well, I think. But when they're driving down the road as the outbreak is just starting and Sarah's still alive, like those people on the side of the road that are like, "Hey, like come help us!" Like he's already like, "No, survival instinct. We're not helping them. We're going. We're getting out of here."
Yeah.
So maybe he's always been that way, but I hope that the kind of like one of our topics later is like other things we hope they'll expand on, and I hope that they kind of give a little bit more of what happened between Sarah and where Joel is now. Like I think it'd be cool to see a little bit more story in between that and like seeing Ellie for the first time. So
one thing I wrote this in the notes, just like one thing I really liked from the story that they are expanding on already was just the opening scene from 1968, where the kind of the Dick Cavett type show where they explain like what the cordyceps kind of are, or like the potential of it, was a really cool way to ground the series in reality, because I'm sure some people are coming to the show expecting it to be kind of HBO's version of The Walking Dead, where I feel like this compared to, I will never call The Last of Us a zombie show, because they're not zombies, they're fungus, they're clickers, they're infected, but they're not zombies in the traditional way. And some people who don't love the story as much as I do will be like, but it's zombies. And I'm like, not really. And the fungus
it does hit a lot of the tropes, but
it hits a lot of the tropes, but at the end of the day, I don't know, the fungus, that's a much cooler version and much prettier version of like undead.
And speaking of the fungus, like the little things coming out of the runners and valves, that was a interesting,
so gross,
so nasty,
interesting development. I was like, man, I'm glad that wasn't in the game, because like that was some terrifying stuff,
especially with an old lady. I have a Josh Zermino, friend of the show. He's terrified of like old people in like horror films and stuff like that, and so this was not the scene for him.
I feel like Josh is a normal person. I mean, you should be terrified of all old people in horror films. They're the worst.
They're usually the scariest ones.
Old people and little children, like, be afraid in a horror movie.
That scene where Sarah's just reading something on the shelf, and you can just, it's blurred out, but you can just see her like,
that's crazy,
twitching.
Man.
You're just like, oh no.
And her mouth like slowly starts to open. I was like, man, that's just a really interesting shot. I liked that they like blurred everything out on that shot too.
So
cool. And
so
then the
tense.
dog, and then that dog just looking at her as Sarah's walking out the door, and the dog's like just like whining at the old lady.
What is happening?
So creepy, dude.
Yeah, that was a good setup. That whole lead up was a perfect setup, I think. Real quick, I did want to shout out. I think Pedro's casting is great. I think he really is already in that role very well.
It's like, it didn't take 30 seconds before I was like, oh yeah, he's Joel. I got it. It's perfect.
I'm good for it. Yep. One of my friends said, he's like, the only thing I didn't like was them trying to sell him as being like 36 years old, like in the very first scene or whatever. They're like, I don't know if I believe him being 36 right there, but whatever. Bella Ramsey, also, I think she really is like tonally, she's like great. Like already the way that she's like, just her behavior with people and how she kind of interacts with individuals. I think she's just nailing that tone. I still think it's like hard for me to see her visually, because I'm just like, man, I'm so used to Ellie's face, and she's such a prominent character. And then also from Game of Thrones, like just jumping Bella Ramsey into this character, I'm like, it's a little bit it's a little bit jarring.
And I agree with you, Jake. And to be fair to her, we have not seen the breadth of Ellie's character yet. We've only gotten like the punk side of her, like all the defenses are up right now. What makes Ellie so wonderful is like, the humorous moments, and that she is like the kind of heartbeat of the story. And we haven't seen any of that from her. And I'm excited to see how she grows into the character over the course of the show. Because right now, I mean, I love those moments of Ellie and like how she is so like sharp and, vulgar and, quick-witted, but at the same time, like there's a whole nother side to her that hopefully the show will explore in the future.
Right. Same. So kind of along the same lines of that. So like, what are you hoping that the show expands on a little bit? So Ryan, I'll let you go first on this one. Like, based on what we've seen right now, is there anything that you want to see the show kind of build into or like do more of?
Yeah, I would love to see more about what caused Joel and Tommy to split up. I think they're kind of going to go into a little bit of that. So that is one plot point I'm really excited for them to dive into more. But one thing I'm really excited, and I believe they have him cast, we get Nick Offerman as Bill, which that's excited. Like perfect casting.
Absolutely.
But I think we're also going to meet Frank. And that is going to be really interesting because in the story, we only see what happens to Frank.
Right.
But that is such Bill, the more I play that game, the more I know the Bill chapters, it's so short. You're only with Bill a very small amount of time. But he's such a pivotal character in the game because it shows you like this could have been Joel if he just shut everyone out. Like if he doesn't let Ellie in, if he didn't never let Tess in, if he just isolated entirely and just lived out on his own. Bill is a perfect example of you just go crazy. You talk to yourself. You just are an asshole to everyone. And
always on edge. Yeah.
And it's a survival instinct. And Joel has part of that in him, but it's really interesting seeing Bill. I'm just excited to see Bill's character and that story expand a little bit more because that's a really fun part of the story that I don't think gets a lot of love when people actually talk about the game. It's kind of almost like a forgotten part of the game.
Yeah,
it's
Bill
like, this is where you build bombs, and that's about it. But Bill's so cool.
It almost felt like a little like a mini game section almost, where like there were like a little bunch of like puzzles and traps you had to like kind of disarm as you were trying to get through here, and there was always just Bill in the background, and like, but that section was so small. I don't really like remember a lot from it other than he was kind of like crazy. So yeah, that'll be, and like again, Nick Offerman casted as him, I think is just going to be so cool to see. I love Nick Offerman, so can't wait for that. Landry, anything on your side?
I think that it's kind of along the same lines as what Ryan's saying, but like I want them to really flesh out some of these stories that you get to see through the environment of playing the video game. I mean, that's one of the best things about the video game and why they're masters of narrative storytelling in that capacity is you'll be walking through a level and you'll see pieces of a story of someone you've met through a diary journal or something. Like the best example of this is right outside of I think it's Boston. No, it's not Boston. One of the cities you go to where you meet Sam and what's the guy's name? Sam and
that's Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. Yeah, thank you. So you come across this character named Ish, and you first like see his boat crashes on the shore, and you're reading his journal, and he kind of tells you like during the outbreak, I was at sea. I stayed out there as long as I could. I had to come in, and you can kind of pick up pieces of his story through the environment, and you can see that he moved into these sewers and was kind of living like just like this caveman for a little while, going into this suburbs and picking up food. Then he eventually goes into the suburbs and meets this family and says, hey, I've got a safe place if you want to come over here because I know things are going crazy out here and there's a ton of looters. And so they do. They go in, they start a little community, and bad things happen. eventually, like they always do in this world. But I'm pretty sure if you find all of the pieces to the story, he winds up escaping with like one other person. And I just think it'll be cool if they can show us kind of what I've just always imagined in my head through that storyline and everything. So, and there's multiple things like that throughout the course of The Last of Us where you can just kind of pick up on a narrative thread that the developers have left for you, but you don't have to find it unless you're a psychopath like me who's going to like pick apart every thread of the game. And then I'm really excited to see how the season ends, because now that we have Last of Us Part 2, they can kind of do some retrospective storytelling with the doctors and Abby and inserting those characters in a way that will really flesh that story out.
I wonder how much they'll pull from part 2, you know, even like some of the flashbacks like that you get from those elements. I wonder if they'll toss them in there.
I think they will. And I think what they're going to have to do is really get rid of some of the subtext on how Joel is not just a hero, because I think that maybe it's a video game audience. And I don't mean to rip on video game players. I mean, I've been one my whole life, but I think there was a disconnect with what the directors were trying to tell us, in my opinion, very clearly in part 1, and that Joel is a very flawed hero. He's a tragic hero. He's an anti-hero. And he made some decisions that in any kind of world are going to have some serious repercussions. And I think that the narrative is just going to really have to hit a couple of those home so that when we get to part 2, all of the consequences for those actions feel a little more earned. Maybe even though I feel like they were perfectly earned, I think that the public has to get there as well.
Right. Well, I guess we can I was just going to mention one other thing that I'm hoping that they kind of expand on would be like the Fedra stuff. I don't know if you guys caught that in the very beginning. Like they're showing the faces of Fedra more, and you're getting to see that they actually are people that care still, you know, like some of them do at least, like, hey, I'm going to try and help you out. Even the guy that Joel is like giving drugs to, like, you know, he's sort of like a friend of theirs and is helping them, like, hey, you know, stay off the streets. Like people are like jumpy, like there's a good chance you're going to die. Like if you show up in the wrong part of town, like, and then also just like the woman that finds the boy in the very opening scene where he's coming into the city, you know, you can tell that this is just
kills him with kindness,
a normal day for her. Yeah. You know, to be able to be kind while you're killing a child, but at the same time that child's infected and they're just like, yeah, this isn't going to work. So yeah, I'm curious to see if they do that anymore with Fedra, because really you didn't get a lot of that from the game. You just knew they were like militaristic and not great. So
no, I love that, man. I love I think, you know, a 2023 audience, we need like a lot of great characters, you know, people having normal motivations. I don't think it's fun to watch just purely evil people on screen.
Yeah.
As much as it is for people who have actual motivations. Like, you know, we know why Joel killed that soldier. And they did a great job of filming that, but showing that flashback to Sarah, and I mean, that triggered him obviously. And, you know, that protector instinct kicked in, and that's why he did that. So.
Well, real quick, I did want to talk about this in our previous section. Let's talk about the main scene, I guess, with Sarah passing away. I feel like, I don't know, what were y'all's thoughts? How did you feel like that was handled with her death?
You can go for it, Ryan, if you want.
Well, I can tell you what my experience was right before that scene happened. I was watching the show with my girlfriend, and right before that scene comes on, you get that incredible performance of the infected just running through that diner.
That was sick.
That was incredible.
Unbelievable. That guy is just running.
He should have gotten the biggest paycheck of anyone in that whole episode.
I literally said, great stunt man. Like, this man is just putting his body on the line.
Dude.
Incredible stuff. So I had the remote. I couldn't find the remote anywhere. It was just around, and Dory wanted to rewind it to go watch that scene. And I was like, hey, trust me, you don't want to like look for the remote right now. Something bad is about to happen, And she's just like, no, where is it? And so she was just distracted the whole time. And I was like, so I was a little taken out of it at the time. So I'm because I'm worried about the fucking remote, but also I've seen this scene so many times it hurts, but it gets me every time. But I think with this time, I think I had a little bit going on, and I don't know. I think since I wasn't playing, this is where it gets me a little. This is where I think the game is better, is because since I wasn't playing as Joel, I wasn't as attached to Sarah, I think. Even though they had more backstory on Sarah, I just wasn't. I was like, this isn't like my kid. This is just a kid. It's weird how I felt.
Well, you know what, Ryan? What's so interesting about that is that for a large portion of that scene, you're playing as Sarah, right? Until the car crash.
Yeah.
And then you take her and then you've literally got her in your arms. But I feel like the show really did an amazing job of setting up Sarah almost as a protagonist of the show. The way it was shot, you followed Sarah the whole entire time up to that point, and I mean, I guess it was the exact same thing, the car crash, and then suddenly Joel's got her in his arms. But for the first 30 minutes of the show, you are following her and her exploits, and it does set her up to be the protagonist of the show. If you're coming in fresh, I think that was just as impactful as a moment, because they really did pull a 180 on you there. And I thought, just her as a character, like my wife has never seen The Last of Us, and she was extremely shook by Sarah dying. She's like, no, she's like, I loved her. Like I was ready to be with her for the rest of the show, like
they Ned Starked her ass in 30 minutes.
Yes, exactly. I'm sure there will be some comparisons to that. And it's like, I think the actress just did such an incredible job. And yeah, so I think they really nailed that. And I was worried about that part more than anything in episode 1.
Yeah.
By far, just because I knew that was going to be incredibly difficult to pull off. And I feel like they did.
Yeah. I'm the opposite of you, Ryan. I think it was more impactful than the game for me. But only because like I have a hard time sometimes with video games fully like connecting in the story because of just the actual animation, there is that uncanny valley, and like it's not always uncanny, but like sometimes even in the game you're just like, I'm not fully sold on this performance, even though like the motion capture actors are like just killing it. Mm-hmm. There's only so much emotion that they could have conveyed in those graphics,
it's the eyes, man. The eyes are dead, and the actors a lot of times, and
their mouths sometimes too, like when they're like really sad, you just really it doesn't portray as well in the game. So like when something really sad happens in the game, I'm sad about it. But this one, I think just when Sarah was convulsing and like she was like freaking out, and he was like trying to like get her up and stuff, and when he like yelled to Tommy, I was like, oh man, that one got me.
Same, man.
It's the thing that he can like fix it is like I think that's like the hardest part when he's like trying, he's like, no, she's not gone, he's like, I can fix this. This is okay. You're going to be okay, baby. I know it hurts. It's going to like, that kills me every fucking time. It's like, and then he just realizes like, it's done. And yeah, I think the other character in that would be Gustavo Sandoval. Is that his like the composer? I mean, the soundtrack of like in the whole game, but in that scene especially is just like so powerful, because I mean, it just sweeps you away, and you're just like, I mean, it gets you every time, and they did a terrific job with it in the show. I hate telling that anecdote to where I was, because I've seen it twice since then, and I think both Sarah or Pedro and I can't remember who played Sarah, but they both did a terrific job. And I don't know is Tommy the guy who plays Tommy in the game? I know Marlene is.
I actually don't know.
Because he sounds just like Tommy. Like his voice sounds exactly like Tommy.
Nico Parker, who plays Sarah.
Yeah.
I'll look it up real quick. Who plays Tommy in The Last of Us? Because I didn't realize that after the HBO show, the actress that plays Marlene was talking about like, I first met Marlene when I was auditioning for her, and I was like, wait, is that does that mean she plays Marlene? And I had to look it up, and I was like, oh, cool, it actually is her. Like, she looks just like her, and she sounds just like her. Gabrielle Luna is who is playing Tommy, I think, and I don't know. We'll do some after set. We'll do some after set digging on that one to give you all the answer on that one.
Cool.
All right. So then I guess, let me see. I do want to talk about this a little bit, just how they're going to approach part 2. So how do you guys feel like, we I don't even know. Do you think that this is going to end like season 1 is just going to be part 1? Or do you think there'll be like season 2 is the second half of part 1? Like, I don't know like how they're going to play this out necessarily.
I don't know. I don't know.
I would think that season 1 is part 1. It would make sense.
Yeah. It would also make sense if season 1 ends with winter and starts in, like, if they're doing the whole story. I don't know where I would end it. It would make sense for season 1 to just be the whole first game. But that'd be great. That'd be great. And I don't think it would be a good idea,
Ryan. It would be really cool to see it end around winter, because like I've been working on like kind of a really deep dive analysis of part 1 and 2, and you can really chart Ellie's change in that winter section into kind of like who she becomes. It is Joel's death, obviously, that's the catalyst for her to like seek out the vengeance, but you can chart her change in like her character in those winter moments, in those scenes with David. And then those are the times where she finds out that, hey, I'm capable of killing people too. Obviously she killed someone before, but it's literally like a moment where she has to save Joel's life. So I think that would be a good place for it. And if, it just depends on, maybe, I think they probably started to realize they had a hit on their hands while they were building out the script for this, I'm sure. But gosh, man, part 2, I think, is going to I'm excited for it because I think it's so genius. And I think it's going to be there's none of the criticism, the undeserved criticism of part 2 is going to be around. I think.
Well, it's because you're not making people play as these terrible scenes. I think that's like where playing it feels so different than just watching it. True. If you watch the story of Last of Us Part 2, it's not something that's so far off from how things would go. But in reality, like when you're playing, I don't want to get too into the details, but like when you're playing as some of the things, like when you're playing as Abby and some of the things that you're doing, or Ellie and some of the things you're doing, like, dude, I hate that I'm being forced to do this right now. Like, I hate that. I do not like this.
It's weird,
and it's such a drastic change tonally from part 1.
I would love to see part 2 split into. It needs to definitely be 2 seasons, if not longer. Than that. The story is so long.
There should be a Last of Us Part 3. It's already out, and it is the second half of part 2.
Yeah, and that is part 2 should be its own season. Like, it would be so interesting for HBO to try and do that with the show too, which would make really you weird. Like, it would be really hard to do, but it would be like, you hate this character, and then it devotes like almost an entire season to this character you hate, to where you're like,
I think that'd be too risky. I think they have to. They probably have to tell the story simultaneously, at cutting back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
It would almost be impossible to allow or to expect audiences to view season, the other side of season 2 all over again in season 3. I mean, I know that's what they did on part 2, and they pulled it off, but
I think one of the things I love about going back and playing, I played part two. I played Last of Us 1 like 3 times and Last of Us Part 2 twice. And the difference between those two games is almost the opposite. When you revisit The Last of Us Part 1, you kind of feel weird about playing Joel. But when you revisit The Last of Us Part 2, for me, I loved playing Abby a lot more the second time through. Like Abby's story the second time through was something that I connected with more and felt more of her. I saw her more of a hero the second time through and really, really loved her character. So I don't know how they would do that.
Honestly, it is such a lighter arc because you are playing her redemption narrative. You are playing her atoning for the terrible things she did. And she begins to understand that. Yeah. Whereas, you're coming off of Ellie's arc, which is just, a free fall into the 9th ring of hell. And it's awful. It's really awful. And
not great.
It only gets worse. So.
Oh, man. Well, so, I guess kind of like closing this out, like just overall thoughts, and I'll kind of start to like set the tone. And Landry, I know you had some interesting things, and Ryan, you know about this as well, so I want to hear you guys talk about this. But what I'll say is, I think The Last of Us was already written in a way, it's one of the few games, and I guess next to like Uncharted, that was written in a way that was already like a movie disguised as a game. Like this was the first game for a lot of people. I mean, this is why it was so well regarded. It really was one of the best stories that the gaming industry had ever seen. And so pumped that this has succeeded, and like, not surprising that it's doing well. And I just hope that more studios see this kind of success and choose to move across this medium, because it's only going to bolster both sides of the industries. Like you have your film, and you have the gaming side, and the gaming side is massive in terms of incoming revenue. And so if you can just move that audience base over to a TV series, I mean, it's just a no-brainer on the business side. So very excited for more. But Landry, I know there was some overall thoughts or something else that you guys wanted to kind of unpack maybe. So
so Ryan, you may have to help me out with this, but I was just wanted to point out that there's already some really good fan theories out there. I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw this IGN video, and I was like, man, I got to click it. A fan theory. Let's see what's going on. And so in the very beginning of The Last of Us, they're like in the kitchen, and Sarah's making pancakes and pouring the orange juice, and they start talking about, is it Jakarta, Indonesia? And something's going on on the news clip, and we're not really sure what it is. But what happens is Joel and Sarah don't actually eat those pancakes, right? They're out of pancake mix. And the next scene, Joel and Sarah are offered this biscuit from their neighbors, and they refuse the biscuit. It's kind of like this joke, like, who would take a biscuit from the crazy old people next door? And a little later on,
I would. I fucking would. I never say no. I never say no to a house-made fucking biscuit, dude.
I don't know, man. Maybe it was the vibe they were giving off. Like maybe there was some foreshadowing of them becoming infected later on. They look a little sweaty to me. So a little later on, Sarah is offered a cookie from the lady, and it's like, okay, she's a teenager. She's going to take the cookie, but she doesn't. She doesn't eat the cookie. And finally, at the very end, Joel forgets the cake. So there's all these things that contain flour that they don't wind up eating. Jakarta happens to be the largest flour mill, where the largest flour mill in the world is.
No way.
Now, bear with me.
Yeah, dude.
Bear with me.
No way.
The U.S. would not be importing flour from Jakarta, right? We're like a huge... wheat's a huge product for us. I mean, it's possible that there are some global brands that come here, but for the most part, it's a little far-fetched to believe that this Jakarta, Indonesia flour plant is what the infected was traveling through. However, if it is some kind of fungus that like traveled through flour in some way, this is where I haven't really followed the theory too much, because I just watched this is me riffing on what I saw in the video, essentially. maybe it is like gluten-free people are just gonna take over the world. Is that what they're trying to get at here? That's
keto is gonna save us all, dude.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, Atkins is just Atkins and keto are like the big things. Yeah, that is. I saw that on Reddit, and I was like, yeah, that connects. And then on the HBO Last of Us podcast, I believe the creator, not Neil Druckmann, but I can't remember
the Chernobyl guy.
The Chernobyl guy. He said, yeah, we've hidden some breadcrumbs about the cordyceps and literal. He used the word breadcrumbs.
It's all coming full circle.
And you're just sitting there, just like, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's four things with flour in them that they just did not, so that's a pretty big hint.
I think that's a huge stretch, because the whole point is like you won't get sick if you're not in a place that has active spores, and everyone there is eating all kinds of random stuff.
Well, they're not doing spores, so that is something
that is true.
They also said they're not doing spores in this season. That's why like Pedro Pascal and Tess weren't wearing a mask when they saw. Also, we didn't even talk about that beautiful infected just up against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
That set piece was gorgeous. It makes me so excited. I can't wait to see clickers, because they're going to look like that. Like, God, the amount of makeup people had to put on for being clickers has to be
so gross.
It's going to be so gross, but they're also beautiful in a weird way. I don't know. Mushrooms are so pretty. So, but yeah, those things are going to be gnarly, dude. But that is one thing that I love. That fan theory is about the bread being the thing that infects everybody.
That'll be a fun thing to track as we're watching the show too. Just keeping your ears open for weird flour or bread comments. Like, why has no one eaten the bread?
Yes.
So yeah, Ryan, did you have any last closing out overall thoughts?
Well, one thing I just wanted to give Naughty Dog and HBO a lot of credit for is they do such a great job with representation, between having characters of different races, different sexual orientations, and, genders all across the board. They just knock it out of the park. And that's something I'm really excited to see with people getting into the show and maybe into the game, is that maybe this will get more people interested in gaming, and maybe kind of finally tip over that arc that, really crushed The Last of Us 2's ratings, because it was written by a bunch of people who thought it was too woke, but really it's just a terrific story. They just can't get behind, being a woman whose tits aren't out for more than 20 seconds. So I really hope that that's something that comes out of this show. But I mean, I it's just something that I really value a lot, and I'm really excited to see how HBO's casting is going and everything like that. It's really cool. I'm very, very excited for it.
Yeah, Landry, any overall thoughts, closing thoughts?
Man, I feel like I've exhausted all of my everything I have to say about the show. I'm excited. It's on the right track. I can't wait to watch the rest of it.
Me too.
And I will say one just thing that I love is that it's a weekly show, because that means we'll be talking about it for 8 weeks, and people can't binge it, and it's going to stay a part of the conversation. I have no idea why Netflix doesn't do that with Stranger Things and other stuff like that. It just seems like such a layup, And the Stranger Things
always been
conversation was so. Me and Ryan had some excellent text messages just going back and forth, but I do remember feeling a little frustrated because it was hard to gauge where each other were in the series. Oh, I've watched all of it and he hasn't watched all of it. And then he watched all of it. And we were talking about it 2 days later, and we're trying to talk about episode 4, but it's we already watched 2 more. It's it's just really annoying, So you ruin the ability to have a good conversation if you're going to just dump them all out like that.
which is wild because Netflix does that for their cheaper shows, like their reality TV shows. They'll drop like 3 and then wait a week and drop 3 more. But they don't do that with like their flagship shows, which is really, kind of
interesting. It's almost like they want people to treat it like either a TV show or like just a super long movie. They're just like, you can watch this however you want to, and people will binge the whole thing in like a weekend. So it just depends. But yeah, I'm a big fan. And then real quick, fun little lightning round here to close it out. So, we're talking about adapting video games into the medium, into a TV series or a film. So I thought it'd be fun to just get a hot take from you guys on what you might like to see converted next into a series or movie. So I'll go first. I don't know if you guys have played Returnal or not, but
that's a great choice.
So atmospheric. I think it's such a really interesting like story, and it's all one person, but it's about, if you guys have seen or read The Martian, it'd be kind of like the similar concept. Just one person on an alien planet trying to survive. The only difference here is there are other aliens that are trying to like actively kill you. And that the whole like time loop mechanic, I think, could just be like really, really interesting. So, shot in the dark, but I think that story has some legs that could be converted really easily. What do you got, Landry?
I'm just looking at what Ryan put in the Oh man, BioShock is. I was gonna say nothing, but that's just so stupid and boring. And curmudgeon-y. So I'll go with BioShock, which I think is another one of those games that like blew my mind narratively. It's very sparse on narration, which I think is totally great for video games. But the environmental storytelling, being in that world, exploring that in some kind of further narrative, and the back and forth between the kind of the main character you are and what's going on in the world could be cool and interesting. And I think probably even like a good little experimental film. I think someone could play around with that idea and come up with a pretty cool screenplay.
Spooky too. Oof.
Yeah.
Spooky.
Returnal's pretty spooky, bro.
It is pretty spooky too. Yeah.
Got those
All
vibes.
Right. Ryan, what's your hope?
Man, I really hope they turn NBA Playgrounds 2K into something real. That would be really cool to see. Like, I would love to just see like Kevin Durant out here playing with Michael Jordan and Shaq and Larry Bird. It'd be so fun just see some 2-on-2 just out on the beach. They have big heads. They're able to do cool stuff, big dunks. It'd be really fun. I wish
just they jump 30 feet in the air.
Honestly, I would settle if they turned NBA 2K into like a real thing. I would watch that almost like 3-4 times a week. I would watch so much NBA 2K if they turned that into something real. I'd probably watch.
Yeah, if it came on ESPN, on Wednesday nights at like 7:30 and 10 o'clock, I'd probably tune in every once in a while.
Yeah, I'd even watch it on TNT Tuesdays from 7 to 10. It'd be really rad.
Hey, I think you should pitch it, man. I think you really should.
It'd be a good idea.
Run this up
we could make billions, dude.
Run this up the board of the guys at ESPN. I got an idea.
Basketball. Take the video game and make it real.
Oh, I love it. Well, unfortunately, y'all, that is going to close us out. That is the end of our podcast. Listeners, thank you so much for bearing with us as we talked about the first episode of The Last of Us. What did you think of the episode? We'd love to hear from you. Did you like it? Did you hate it? And what are you looking forward to? Landry and Ryan, thank you guys so much again for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Any place where people can find you out there? Anything you guys want to plug right now? Ryan, I'll let you go first.
Yes, please follow my band on Instagram. We're cop_rad. We're Good Cop Rad Cop on Instagram. Mm-hmm. We're a parody comedy music band. We're great. We're really fun. A great live band. Please go see us. We also have a podcast out now called the Itty Bitty Ditty Committee. It's on everywhere where you can get your podcasts. It's a songwriting podcast. So every week we sit down, we talk, and then we'll write a song at the end of the episode. So that Itty Bitty Ditty Committee and Good Cop Rad Cop. Those are my plugs.
Love it. Itty Bitty Ditty Committee. I love that. Love that name. Landry, what you got? What you plug?
You can follow me on Twitter at Soft Iconoclast. That's pretty much the only place you can find me. If I'm ever up to anything on any podcasts or writing a blog post or doing anything else, that's where you'll find me, and that's where you'll find the information.
Soft Iconoclast. Yeah. Landry's the man. All right. Well, as always, be sure to write in, send in emails if you want to bitcast@bitbloggist.com. And until next time, this has been BitCast. Thanks for tuning in to talk about some stuff.